Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be talking, thinking. Hold on, got Discord messages. Are they important? Sounds good. Right. Well, you can tell by today's episode, we're going to be talking about Okami. The game. I'm not going to be recreating anything. If you're new here, this is just a daily Animal Crossing vlog I have where I talk about things I want to. And yesterday I finished the final episode of Okami. As far as I can tell, maybe more episodes will come out if I need to buy time to finish the next game's Fawnhallow, but we'll see how that goes. But good morning, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 11:47 AM on Sunday, November 10th, 2024. I forgot when we're morning here. So Daisy May is here. Yeah, so what was I gonna say? I don't remember exact things off the top of my head, but on the whole, I did enjoy Okami, especially because I don't think it's a game which would necessarily, like, from the mechanical gameplay level, appeal to me that much. It's kind of like a Zelda-like, which I've never had like a strong draw to play. These sort of like big open world, well, they're not open world necessarily, but big exploration sort of games on a grand adventure here and there. But I actually thoroughly enjoyed Okami, and I think that's part of the reason is because its art style was amazing. It's gorgeous. I am infatuated with this, traditional Japanese style with a same sort of like watercolory-esque brushstroke aesthetic, and yeah, it's a very stylized art style, obviously, and it's definitely the number one reason I even know about this game in the first place, or what drew me to it and actually pushed me to actually try and play it in the first place. Obviously, it's got a good critical reception. It's a classic. It's beloved for good reason, I think, but it definitely is old. Like, it's almost 2 decades old now at this point, the original. Some parts of it I don't think aged that well, but I think it's still a very enjoyable experience nonetheless. Something you can really sink your teeth into if that's your sort of thing, especially if you like Zelda-like sort of games. I mean, I think you'd love Okami. I love the brush technique when it works. Is really fun. I super enjoy summoning these elemental powers here and there. But yeah, I'll warn you before I get into any spoilers, I suppose. There'll be one warning for mild spoilers and one warning for all bets are off, anything could be spoiled. So I guess let's get our gripes out of the way first, because they're not many, and I feel like I'm sort of like conflicted about it, because it feels like if these things, like, it feels like a small thing, but it also feels like it's quite pervasive because of how key it is to everything. But one thing is, the camera control of this game is strange, to say the very least. Like, a lot of the time I definitely felt like I was fighting the camera at some like platforming sections, especially trying to figure out like how to get the best angle on things. Sorry, little pause. I forgot what I was saying. I think I was saying about the things which I would consider mild annoyances in the game. The main one I can think of is that, especially as you get more celestial brush techniques, is the fact that it tends to not recognise that well. Like, there's been a few times. Some of the times I fully admit on my own fault. But I suppose part of it is by the design of the fact that if you start it on an element, it will take that element as is. Which can be a bit much sometimes. It's like, that's not always what I wanted to do. But sometimes it also, like, straight up just doesn't recognise like other moves you're trying to pull, which is, as the case may be, it could be a, how do I say, pepcac issue, where it's just like, oh, maybe I'm not doing the key features of a drawing as well as I should be, which means that there tends to be a little bit je ne sais quoi, a little bit of a a gap between like my expectations and what the computer sees it as, which is fair. I don't know if that's necessarily a technical limitation, just more like it's a difficulty, I suppose, to truly find out what someone drew. maybe that's a technical limitation. Maybe that's something which nowadays could be implemented even better, but who knows. At the end of the day, it wasn't too big an issue. I think one of the bigger issues is more to do from like a game designer sort of perspective. I did say the camera control can sometimes be a real pain to fight. Like I made a platforming section's a bit because it's not a game which I feel like is known for its platform. In my opinion, it doesn't have like very sweet and tight movement and that sort of thing. I don't play it and be like, wow, you know, the movement options of this game feel fantastic, or like my favorite thing about it. It's very much for the brush and the interesting sort of puzzle and exploration which comes with it. But sometimes it is a bit of a real fight to try and properly navigate and see what's going on. But there are some like game design things which I'm like, it's a bit more meh. I guess we'll be getting into mild spoilers now, so just be wary of that. If you haven't played a game and want to remain spoiler free, but how would I put it? There are some things which feel iffy about the game design of it. The one thing I can definitely think of, I'm not going to say what boss yet, but you fight some bosses like multiple times, and the first time you fight it, I was like, okay, yeah, this is a cool fight. The second time you fight it, be like, okay, I guess, you know, story arc wise, you know, it makes sense. It's sort of like a thing which ties everything together. The third time you fight it is surprisingly very easy. It's like a joke. I also think sometimes it's a bit unclear to me personally, which again, this might be a pepcac issue. It's hard to figure out sometimes what the game wants you to do in a mechanical sense. I guess it is there to encourage experimentation, trial and error, but it's also hard to figure out what is actually doing feedback and what isn't giving feedback. There's a boss later on which I was like, okay, you know, most of the times it's been like, you've got the new mechanic, use a new mechanic on the boss to, you know, or the enemy, and that's how you end up, you know, defeating them. But then this boss, I was just like, I cannot figure out what is going on with this boss. Like, why is this mechanic not working? And because normally when you attack a boss and nothing ends up happening, you're just like, obviously, what do you think? You think, okay, that's not effective, I've got to find a different avenue. But it turns out for this boss, you actually just have to keep attacking it until, you know, something happens, despite the fact it doesn't feel like there's much feedback of being like, hey, you know, what you're doing is actually working. So I very much was just like, it's like a level of obscurity where I'm just like, I don't really know what's going on. Sometimes it's hard to get the feedback I want, which I feel like is, it's definitely because it's one of the earlier games, I suppose. If it was a game which was created and released now, I think there'd be more game design decisions which went into it to necessarily make sure that feedback loop to the player is kind of more clear. But again, these are my own personal experiences. I'm not going to say that this is the norm for everyone. And it was only a few enemies. There are two enemies I can think of in the game, but like one of them is kind of spoilers. Spoilers in a sense, which I don't even know if matters because I don't remember what this character was, what this boss was. But yeah, I mean, there's like another. So those are my two major points. I think is sometimes the game design decision's a bit more of a slog than I suppose necessarily have to be. That's another thing. It's like sometimes the dialogue in the cutscenes are like really slow. Sometimes. But I understand the need to do so. But like a lot of the cutscenes, you can dictate the speed. You can go on by pressing enter and going forward. But sometimes in the cutscenes, it's like they don't give you an option, so you have to very slowly watch each word come up bit by bit, even on fast speed, which is a little insane, I think. But yeah, those are the two main things. They just feel like they're not enough to like stop me the grand experience of a game, but they are enough that I notice them when I was playing. I think from now we'll have just all spoiled. Anything can be spoiled at this point. All bets are off. So just be warned if you haven't played a game yet. It's a game where story kind of matters, I would say. but it's also a game which, to me, I also feel like is comedic and light-hearted enough, and has a little bit of detachment from the story, but even if you know the exact details, it's not going to ruin it for you or anything like that. So the boss I was talking about, by the way, was a fireball, which I didn't realise that you had to basically keep attacking it until its armor falls off. Because I don't know if that's true or not, because I feel like when I was attacking it, it gave like the red, like, oh, no damage indication, which made me immediately go, oh, I need to do something else, but I might be misremembering that, to be honest. So, yeah. Okami's very interesting. It's more of a neutral point, because it's actually a lot more light-hearted and comedic than I thought it was going to be. It definitely feels like it has that sort of mid-early 2000s sense of humour to it, which is, I don't want to say slapstick, it's not quite slapstick, but it's got like a similar sort of slapstick-y vibe, where things sort of like have this big build-up and then, oh, it's just super underwhelming, and then you like imagine the characters all fall over being like, what? That's the sort of vibe it has a lot of the time. It doesn't take itself too seriously, which very much surprised me, because it has like quite a traditional serious aesthetic to it, but I think that sort of light-heartedness ends up working quite well for it. However, characters, I would not say the characters are all that deep. Like, a lot of them have interesting stories, but it's not like I look at these characters and be like, there's a huge amount of nuance to them. Isun kind of does, but then also Isun is very one note towards the beginning, as being, horny, shall we say? So, like, a lot of it does feel like very early 2000s. You look at some of the designs of some of the characters, you're like, okay, you know, chill out a little bit. I understand the joke, but it sort of like sometimes plays a line with it being like a very serious, okay, Phoebe, not traditional, a very serious game, but then it also goes into the comedic, which sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's the nature of comedy. It doesn't always have to work for everyone. I think in a lot of the cases it does work. You know, the parts where it's like almost anti-jokes, I think is silly, or where it's just like the characters, though, you know, everyone holds an idiot ball at some point. But yeah, I can't say any characters I thought had like a serious amount of depth to them. But I suppose there's not many characters which you stay with throughout your entire journey. Obviously you have Ami, and obviously you have Isun, I guess Wako as well. Susanoo kind of has the most depth in the first like arc, I suppose, and then I'm trying to think of other ones who have like not Kai, who's the other person from Webkir who has the sword, has like a bit of an arc. They're all very short mini arcs, to be honest, so there's not huge amounts of depth to them. You know, this character is like, oh, you know, he's got a sense of duty, and he's using this sword until he thinks he's worthy, but then it's like, oh, he finds out his worthiness is once he realizes what his true motivations and ideals are. It's not to be worthy, but it's more to be someone who wants to be a defender of a village and thus is worthy because of his virtues. But yeah, that's just kind of like I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I don't think this game is here to take you on huge character arcs and stories. It's not a story-driven, it's not like a story-first game, but it's a game which drives its own story, I suppose. Story, do I want to put it story-driven? I guess so. It's story-driven in a very different way. It's more of like a meeting of a colourful cast of characters. Like, you go on an adventure and you don't stop in any town for any too long a while, but you meet people all the same, and you see snippets and pieces of a life, and then you move on. It's very non-stop in that way, which is not normally something which appeals to me in games. And I do prefer the long form sort of character arcs more, but I still appreciated this as well. There's a lot of memorable characters, to be completely fair, and there are some big moments where I was just like, whoa, like in the second or third arc, I don't know how the arcs are necessarily split up, but when Lao was like an imposter and deceased this entire time, I was like, whoa. That actually surprised me. When the princess died, that was a thing that surprised me as well. A lot of people actually just straight up die in Okami, despite the fact it has this very sort of elegant, regal aesthetic and a very light-hearted comedic attitude. It's got some like serious amount of depth in it. Well, not serious amount of depth, but surprising amount of characters end up dying, which I appreciate them for doing, because that's the sort of stakes it should be. You're playing as a literal deity. What other like stakes for deities and works of gods is like life and death should definitely be one of them, no? What else was I going to say? Yeah, so have I talked about the music and the art? Art and music is by far and away the greatest part of this game. It is a gorgeous looking game. I love this aesthetic. I don't know how many other games jump and leap into this aesthetic and commit to it so wholeheartedly, but it's a fantastic, I'd imagine, celebration of Japanese culture. I'm not that well versed in Japanese mythology and that sort of thing, but I assume it must be. I say ignorantly, but that's not really for me to judge. Not either way, I still very much enjoyed the aesthetic that and the culture it explored within its game as well. I think it was super cool. Like meeting all the zodiac gods and that sort of thing, and it has like nice sort of arcs and messages, at least for like Okami at the end. You know, it's got very heartwarming moment towards the end of Ethan sort of rallying everyone together to renew their belief in Okami. I will say the ending did surprise me a little bit, because it's almost a shame that Ethan couldn't go on you with a journey, but in retrospect it does make sense for who he was meant to be, Celestial Envoy. It's not meant to go back to the Celestial Land. Wakka's true nature being an ally. I expected there was certainly more going on to him. I didn't expect him necessarily to be a celestial angel and be the one who caused the huge calamity, I suppose, in the first place. It felt like all of that character growth was compacted right at the end. I was just like, okay, I don't think I have enough time to sort of really think and process this, but fair enough, I guess. I will say the thing that did disappoint me is the final boss is a bit of an underwhelming design, isn't it? It's kind of like a futuristic looking orb, which is, I don't know, doesn't really hold a candle to like the likes of Orochi. And is the Nine-Tailed Fox called Kyubey? I keep calling him Kyubey in my mind, but I don't think that's right. Like Orochi is a cool design, IMO. The samurai sort of motif with a hydra with different elements. But the boss itself, like, I think is cool in concept. It's not that fun to do 3 times, I would say, but it's still fine. Yeah, combat was kind of cool, I guess. It was almost cool when you can like weave in the brush arts, but I feel like when it's very early on, it's very hard to sort of weave in brush arts in the first place because you have such limited ink, and then later on you have like so much ink, but also like it doesn't do that much. It's not like, I don't know, I guess it kind of needs like a Hollow Knight sort of thing where it's like I can tailor a build to focusing on the brush arts, or I can tailor a build focusing more on the weapon attacks. You can choose your weapon, which is kind of cool. I didn't feel. Sorry about that little jump cut. I forgot what I was saying. I was just rounding things up. Oh yeah, it's a very aesthetically pretty game. I'd love to see like more games with a style. I don't know. Watercolor style is very much something I vibe with aesthetically. But yeah, I mean, it's a game with a stylistic choice which honestly ages incredibly well. I know I played the HD version, but from what I've heard is that the original one also looks still pretty good. Because it's not so much about the fidelity of the graphics as it is much about the artistic design and choices within. Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe it would be cool to see like an Okami 2 or something with maybe a few more polygons and that sort of thing. I'm trying to think what else is interesting. It's a great collectathon game, I suppose, if you like that, and exploration. I'm not so jazzed about that, so I didn't do all the mega collections. I just did some of the achievements here and there just so I could get most people's like stories, I suppose, and whatever happens. I'm trying to think what else. Sometimes I did find the interface a bit of a pain to get through, but that's neither here nor there. I don't know, it's a long game. It's got a lot to sink your teeth into. It didn't seem like a crazy hard game either. None of the puzzles, and the only puzzles I found particularly difficult were ones where I felt like I was obtuse in communications or what was going on. That's mainly just like during combat or whatever. Like it happened in the final fight. like I mean, no, all bets are off Yami, is basically destroying a floor, and I was just like, oh, okay, destroying a floor. It must be a sort of thing where we need to destroy the floor, and then Yami needs to fall through, because I'm doing like no damage to Yami right now. Turns out, no, you just got to keep hitting Yami for a little bit, and eventually you'll get some brush strokes, which will allow you to do more damage. And I was like, oh, okay, fair enough, I guess. Not what I expected. It was a cool mechanical boss fight. I'm just kind of slightly disappointed of how. I expected Yami to be like a very cool, like formless gas cloud or something, but the fact they're just an orb, a sphere which rolls around, is almost a bit underwhelming. And they're like a little porpoise or something inside like a glass orb, which I'm not really sure about the lore about now I think about it. Anyway, it's a really nice game. Like, I'm very happy I got to play it. I have a little Amaterasu statue somewhere. I don't know where she is. She's a sort of thing where you're meant to put like on ramen, like instant noodles, like to keep the steam in or something. And it came with a little Isin, except for I didn't play the game back then, so I didn't know what this little Isin was. I was like, who's this tiny little mushroom thing which came with it? I thought it was a piece that broke off, but no, it's Isin. So I'm glad I get to actually finally understand it now. Martha's Capcom. If I ever actually play you again, I'll play a bit of Okami. Why not? Sorry, a bit of Ami. Yeah, I don't know. It was slightly different from what I expected of how light-hearted it was, but I still very much enjoyed it. And I suppose now we'll have to look forward to whatever our next game will be. So, for now, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been It's not been Okami HG. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons, and I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.